This is David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time. We are on an elevator right now, and I'm making an elevator pitch for local economy. The solutions to the problems that we have described just now. I'm glad you're joining us. You missed the analysis of the grievous national problems, the Republican twilight, the fiscal doomsday machine of their making that under which we are now living our lives, waiting for something to happen. The next big thing that is going to happen. We're not going to just leave it at that, right? I of all the journalists and editorial writers and columnists in Chattanooga, mine is perhaps the bleakest of all. You read Pam Sohn, you read Clint Cooper in the Time Free Press. John Wilson does not write editorials. Nooga.com has nothing to say about anything important. And so really it's left to me to give the free market analysis here in Chattanooga about the future of our city in light of national economy, in light of the ontological necessity of centralization to continue until the very end. It cannot devolve. The system cannot shrink. The system cannot undo the addition of complexity by these new reforms. Right? New reforms are always more complex. They add layers, they add feedback loops, they add surveillance, they add communications systems, and so on to solve the problem caused by complexity earlier. These types of solutions that the national government proposes at every turn, and the state government at every turn, simply will not work. Donald Trump, you have to love him. He's going to be cutting back as he can on some of the more egregious forms of regulation against the free market and against the corporate economy that would not mind being freer than it is today. But we have what we have today in the way of national government because we have a corporate economy, right? We have a company led by gigantic combines of capital, and we have a balloon of credit, a credit balloon in the multi-hundreds of trillions of dollars in the derivatives markets and in the credit markets that are all guaranteeing the future, right? We have promises to repay and bets on promises to repay and bets on S&P rankings of debts and so on, all in the multi-tens of hundreds of trillions of dollars above actual value, right? Actual value of things that are really there, and that is the financialization of the world economy, the inflation, the global inflation, raging for 10 years now, and all the countries are involved in it together, all the central banks in cahoots, so that no one will be seen standing firm. Even the Swiss, a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago or so, went on an inflationary spiral with the Swiss franc, not so that they wouldn't damage, so that country's exports wouldn't be damaged. It joined the drunken party of credit. So what do we do here? The solutions to national disaster, to the Republican twilight, are local economy and the free market. That is my analysis, and I'm sticking with it. I do thank you for calling in 800-8949, 800-8949. But get this, if you call in, you're not going to get everything that I've got to say. So it's really up to you. If you want to contribute to the conversation, please do. But I've got a lot to get to in a short time. This is the elevator pitch, right? We're going up. We heard the disaster in the making. Now we're going back down, right? And before we get to the sunlight in the open boulevard and the traffic sign and the traffic and the crowd of folks in their lunchtime sandwiches and so on, we've got to hear the answer to the problem. And in a nutshell, if the problem is centralization, the solution under God and under godly government is decentralization and devolution. There needs to be, if you look at the Pareto curve, if we have resistance in 4% of the people, that will lead the other 64%. So you, my listener, and I, we're two people, okay? We have a couple 100,000 people in the Chattanooga area. So if we start with you and me, and if we add one person more to our line of thinking, we're on our way to being the 4% that Professor Pareto says, are the crucial movers, okay, right? So a minority moves the majority, and that needs to be people like you, my listener. And I thank you for giving me just a minute of your time here. But listen, you can give me 2 minutes today because you are off today, and you are a new listener. I do thank you for for helping me figure out what to do here in the failure of the republic and its promise. Mike Steele here at the station is just insisting on the following point. And I want to get this out because I know I want to gratify you with his comment. The answer, the thing we need to say at every turn is no. No to what we're supposed to say yes to. Okay, that is the answer in short. And there are two ways of the answer now. There are two ways of getting out of the disaster ahead. One is the geopolitical solution, which again is not something we can do ourselves. We can't really involve ourselves in that, but it's something we have to watch happening. And I'm enlightening you here to how that looks, so that you'll be attuned to it, and pray in God's mercy that it will continue. And that would be in the larger political economic sense. That would be decentralization, okay? And that is, again, the picture of that is collapse of failed structures. And we're finding, rather than finding our sustenance in incomes from that failed structure, we're finding it rather from private sources. And the value is not just in terms of dollars, but in affirmation and trading. And that would be going back in the direction of subsistence agrarian economy that we had here before. Well, let's say before the first Great Depression, where the money economy transformed the old subsistence agrarian economy, where your wealth was in people and land and crops. Right, that was your wealth. You didn't have to have money with which to buy repairs for your tractor or gasoline or fancy equipment for your wife's kitchen. It was all you didn't have to have really that much money. Going back in that direction is part of the solution. So if you see that happening, make note of it. The end of the state began by Martin Van Crevel's estimation in 1945. The modern state, that is, the abstract religious corporation, which presumes to control all of human life, and whose rationale, whose raison d'être in French, its reason for being in French, raison d'être is war. Okay, that is why modern states exist, for warfare. With the nuclear blasts over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the rationale for war ended. War is becoming less and less possible in the traditional sense of massed armies. And if you read Van Crevel's other book, for example, The Transformation of War, you can see that in the details. That's the early 2000s is that latter edition. We have in geopolitics, the large-scale solution again is the collapse of failed structures. Again, there's a benefit there. It's not that you're left without things, but you, my listener, and people like you have been trained to be dependent. You've been trained to think that without a government control of the highways, they would just have accidents left and right. Well, that's just ridiculous. You're denying the idea that the marketplace and private parties can come up with solutions, and that people don't have enough self-interest to organize themselves in large settings like traffic or banking to have security for their own interests. The end of the state will bring the rise of city-states, the rise of regionalism, the rise of trans-legal arrangements. In other words, arrangements in commerce that are outside the legal structures. Even though there is a bill in the Congress right now to effectively to outlaw Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, that's a very dangerous expansion of the money laundering regime. You'll find as the state ends, especially the federal state, you'll find a rise in tribalism and what I call communitarianism. Also, we could call that Christian community. The Christian church has the strongest warm impulse, the strongest heartbeat in this direction. How do we create the solutions as these larger systems around us that draw our heart and draw our emotions fail? Okay. And I want you to make a separation between your love of country and the United States, right? You love America. You, my listener, you love America, and you love what, in your mind, she stands for, or it stands for. And somehow, much of what it stands for is captured by the activities of the United States: the wars, the flags, the parades, beautiful architecture in the federal capitol, in the federal district, monuments, the phallic symbol of the Washington Monument, Abraham Lincoln, all these, with the pools and beautiful trees in Washington. These are the pictures of a kind of holy and sanctified existence. And you're a part of that picture. You're part of that narrative. But no, that is really a kind of deception. We love America, and we are afraid of the United States. In the demise of the United States, in its fiscal demise, as it operates its cranking, violently jiggering fiscal doomsday machine, as it comes to an end and it can't pay the bills anymore, and the discretionary part of the federal budget comes down to 5%, 3%, 2%, 1%, that, all politics will eventually be about 4% of the federal budget. The rest is non-discretionary and compulsory. We will see the clamor for continuing free payments for the seniors, and the military machinery it'll have to dry up. We'll get back to the Clinton era. Clinton brought down the war-making machine in a very favorable way, but it was ramped up again under the Republicans in the neoconservatives that took power after Clinton. So that's the geopolitical picture ahead. Okay, these are the local economy solutions. That's the large picture. But again, you can't do anything about that. That's kind of beyond what you know, what you do. It's beyond your daily life. But what about you, my listener? And here is the part of my elevator speech here, the elevator, the 5-minute presentation of the future, the end of the republic, the republic in twilight, and then you, my listener, and your solutions. What are the solutions for you? How do you, my listener, take part in what we could call a counter revolution? There's a great quote in one of my favorite writers' books. His name is Garrett. The quote says, here's the quote about, it's called The People's Pottage. And he says, so it was that a revolution took place within the form. Like the hagfish, the New Deal entered the old form and devoured its meaning from within. The revolutionaries were inside, the defenders were outside. A government that had been supported by the people and so controlled by the people became one that supported the people and so controlled them. Much of it is irreversible, he says. That is true because habits of dependence are much easier to form than to break once the government, on ground of public policy, has assumed the responsibility to provide people with buying power when they are in want of it, or when they are unable to provide themselves with enough of it according to a minimum proclaimed by the government. It will never be the same. Again, the idea of the revolution and the hagfish eating the old form from within, and the defenders are without. That's you, okay? That's you, my listener. We are on the outside, and the revolutionaries are on the inside. But their system is going to collapse financially and morally. It is morally bankrupt. It is, I would say, under God's wrath and judgment. Look at 9/11. 9/11 was God's wrath and judgment, but it was an inside job. If they have to do things like that, demolition of valuable real estate, that, of course, it was losing money. The World Trade Center was losing money. If they have to do things like that to maintain their power, if almost every single terrorist event in the United States is an FBI operation to catch some poor fool of a Muslim, we can be sure that the ginning up of enemies, the ginning up of fear, the ginning up of clamor for war, which is what talk radio is very good at doing, is part of the effort to maintain the status quo of the national power. What about us here? Well, for one, I think what you should do is ignore the national narrative entirely. Just ignore it. Ignore it. Focus on local. You should focus and support local media, such as David Tulis here, sponsored by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. How do we fight back? We have to fight back, I'd like to say, by authenticity, by personal relationships, and personal care. And you think, man, David, what an irrelevant answer to the problems you've described. Well, they're irrelevant in a way because they don't touch directly. These are oblique solutions. These are solutions to the problem that will let us bypass man by man, family by family, town by town, bypass the problems imposed upon us from without, right? The national economy wrecking local economy. And of course, we are inviting that because we have participated through public school and heavy borrowing and the like. We are at the top of a bubble, by the way, in our local economy. It is a bubble economy. You can see it everywhere you turn. Prosperity glows. Prosperity everywhere based on borrowing. I think the main thing in revival, in local reconstruction, local rebuilding, is repentance. And that would be fearing God, loving God, knowing who God is, the God of the Bible, serving him, bringing salvation to others, not just in terms of the gospel message, but in terms of helping other people. That is local economy. Local economy is about helping other people and serving them in your business, right? Your business is there to serve people. You're not in your business to make money. If you're in your business to make money, you are misguided. Your best answer is to think first about your customers, all the people whom you can help potentially. Help them, think about them, stop don't stop thinking about them every day. Improve their lot, improve their business, save them costs, make their operations more efficient. Have a local business, right? That is part of the gospel message. That is how Christianity brings salvation to others, because Christianity has brought us capitalism and free enterprise. Free enterprise comes from Christianity. Free enterprise prospers when the entrepreneur thinks about the other. That's it. If you do that in your business, whether you're a Christian or not, you are following the Christian theory, and you are going to be involving yourself in the rebuilding of local economy and the free market. And that would be apart from what happens in Washington, apart from what happens in Brussels or London. Local social care, local charity. There should be, for example, in every local store, a line on your receipt that says you gave a tip or a gift. And that would be, say, at a Food City in Saudi Daisy, that Food City manager has a connection with a local church. Let's say First Baptist, just up on the hill next to it, above the parking lot. If you go to Food City and shop there, you put $10 on that payment, and the church fund gets all that money. For what? Local charity, local care, administered by the deacons of that church. This is how, as the federal welfare system becomes sclerotic and continues its depersonalizing effects on families around the country, we can have, again, personal care where people receive aid and care personally and locally. Lococentric charity. Also, other areas of reform would be home education or private education. There is here in East Ridge, July 21 and 22nd, an event that's called the Homeschool Expo. Go to Nooganomics.com to find out more about that. Home care for the aged. Again, if your old mother is needing care because she's a widow, why bring her into poverty, as the lawyers will tell you how to do, and put her on Medicare, Medicaid? Why would you do that? Why don't you have her live with you? Again, this is because she doesn't want me to take care of her. You say, well, you have to convince her that you love her and that this is the best thing for your family, the best thing for the estate, the money that's left over upon her death, right? There should be home care for old people. Get off the tit. Get off the federal tit. We're all on it, and as the pressure to get on the tit increases when you see other people on it, right? How many people do you know who are on disability? How many people are not in the workforce? There is a cataclysm afoot, and you can see about this in the opioid crisis, a cataclysm afoot of people who are no longer on the workforce. Young men for the past 10 years have had a skyrocketing level of non-participation in the labor market. Why? Well, it's the opioid crisis. There are other things that keep people from working. The state does not permit a personal development. Okay, if you're involved with the state, especially if you're on welfare, you cannot have a personal and godly development and care for others. You become bitter and angry. You become a claimant. You become someone exercising your rights. And when you're injured or stiffed or your benefit stops or is reduced, you become angry, right? You have a right to that money, and your character suffers for it. Part of the reform ahead would be honoring God in the Lord's Day. That would be taking the first day of the week off. Honor God with prosperity. Also, localism in politics. Care more about Andy Burke and what he does as mayor than what the Congress does. Paying attention to what happens locally. You, my listener, you need to start a new website that covers the courts. You, my listener, need to have a news service that covers City Hall. You'll get sponsorship for it over time. It'll take a while to develop, but you, my listener, need to be involved in getting people to care about things local as opposed to national, because we can influence the mayor. We can influence city council, county commission. We can have a say on people whom we may call up and visit in person. Localism in politics. Also, there is need to understand the Lord's Supper, which is to say communion, and we need to have, as God has communion with his people, we need to have communion with neighbors. We need to think about our neighbors. What I'm proposing is really an overturning of our perspective. Rather than being gigantic in how we see things, looking at the great developments in Congress and Washington and all the news out of Trump world, we need to think, I'm just being distracted by that, and it's making me nervous and anxious. I need to sort of ignore that, and I need to think, what can I do in Chattanooga? What do I need to do here in Chattanooga this 4th of July weekend? Involve yourself as part of this reform in non-commercial practices. Rather than buying everything prepared, have a garden. Rather than as I say, having your child go into a corporation that is making money off of your estate, your future estate, have your old mother or have your old aunt or your old brother or your old sister who's well past retirement, have her live with you. Build a granny house out back of your house. These are non-commercial practices involving yourself in the economy where it's voluntary and personal, as opposed to the part of the economy where people make a living. There's so much skimming going on in the economy. It's the free market. Okay, it's the free market. But can we avoid going into the marketplace for many, many things to which now we turn for corporate providers or government providers? This is David Tulis, Nooga Radio, AM 1240, FM 92.7. Next, Sam Spade.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7.